The year was 1943, and across the American continent, a remarkable transformation was taking place within the confines of prisoner-of-war camps that housed over 425,000 German soldiers. These installations, scattered across 700 locations in 45 states, would become the unlikely stage for one of the most profound examples of humanitarian medical care in modern history. The story that unfolds challenges every preconception about wartime treatment of enemy prisoners and reveals the extraordinary character of American military medical personnel, particularly the nurses whose dedication would forever change the lives of those they treated. The Geneva Convention of 1929 had established clear guidelines for the treatment of prisoners of war, mandating adequate medical attention, proper housing, and humane care. However, what transpired in American POW camps went far beyond these basic requirements, creating an environment where medical professionalism transcended national boundaries and ideological differences. The German prisoners who arrived on American shores had been conditioned by Nazi propaganda to expect brutal treatment, systematic neglect, and potentially fatal medical experimentation. Instead, they encountered a medical system that would fundamentally alter their understanding of human dignity and professional ethics. Lieutenant Colonel Dorothy Whitman at Camp Opelika represented thousands of American military nurses who approached their duties with unwavering professional standards. These women, trained in the finest American medical institutions, brought with them not only technical expertise, but also a philosophical approach to healthcare that emphasized patient advocacy, individual dignity, and comprehensive care. When German prisoners first encountered these nurses, many were genuinely bewildered by the level of attention and respect they received. The contrast with their experiences under German military medical care was so stark that some initially suspected ulterior motives or psychological manipulation. The American medical system that these prisoners encountered was built upon principles of abundant resource allocation, advanced training protocols, and systematic quality assurance. Unlike the German military medical system, which had become increasingly strained by wartime shortages and ideological constraints, American medical facilities in POW camps operated with supplies that seemed almost unlimited to prisoners accustomed to wartime scarcity. Medical instruments were replaced at the first sign of wear, rather than being repeatedly repaired. Medications were available in quantities that seemed wasteful to German sensibilities, and diagnostic equipment was utilized with a thoroughness that amazed prisoner medical personnel. The philosophical differences between German and American nursing practice became immediately apparent in daily interactions. German military medicine operated within strict hierarchical structures, where questioning superior orders was considered insubordination, while American nurses functioned as thinking professionals with significant autonomy in patient care decisions. This fundamental difference in professional culture created profound cognitive dissonance for German prisoners who had been trained to view medical personnel as mere extensions of military command rather than independent advocates for patient welfare. As word spread through the prisoner populations about the quality of medical care available, a transformation began to occur that would extend far beyond the physical healing of wounds and illnesses. German prisoners began to experience healthcare as a fundamental right rather than a privilege contingent upon military rank or ideological compliance. This realization would prove to be one of the most powerful tools of democratic education, demonstrating through direct experience the values that American society held regarding human dignity and professional responsibility. The stage was thus set for a series of encounters that would challenge every assumption about enemy treatment, professional obligation, and the power of humanitarian action to transcend the boundaries of war. The first medical examinations conducted by American nurses on German prisoners revealed the shocking extent of medical neglect that had characterized German military healthcare during the later years of the war. Prisoners arrived with wounds that had been inadequately treated, infections that had been ignored due to lack of supplies, and chronic conditions that had received minimal attention. American medical staff were appalled to discover bandages that had not been changed for weeks during transport, surgical sites that showed signs of preventable complications, and evidence of medical practices that violated basic standards of care. Captain Helen Morrison at Glennon General Hospital articulated the American nursing philosophy that would transform these prisoners' understanding of medical care. You're responsible for patient outcomes. If something's wrong, speak up regardless of hierarchy. This simple statement represented a revolutionary concept for German prisoners who had been conditioned to accept whatever medical attention was provided without question or complaint. The idea that patients had rights, that medical personnel were accountable for outcomes, and that hierarchical structures could be challenged in service of patient welfare was entirely foreign to their experience. The abundance of American medical resources created constant amazement among German prisoners who had become accustomed to severe shortages and rationing. Hospitals routinely discarded medications that were barely expired, replaced instruments at the first sign of wear, and provided diagnostic tests that seemed excessive by German standards. This apparent wastefulness initially confused prisoners who had been taught that Germany was fighting for scarce resources that America hoarded through territorial conquest. Instead, they witnessed a healthcare system that produced medical supplies through industrial capacity rather than military acquisition, challenging fundamental Nazi narratives about American society and capabilities. German medical personnel among the prisoners found themselves in the unprecedented position of observing American nursing practices up close. These trained professionals were stunned by the level of documentation required for patient care, the systematic approach to treatment protocols, and the emphasis on evidence-based medicine. American nurses maintained detailed records of patient progress, consulted with colleagues about treatment decisions, and continuously monitored outcomes with a thoroughness that far exceeded German military medical standards. This meticulous approach to healthcare demonstrated a commitment to patient welfare that transcended immediate wartime concerns. The treatment of prisoner medical personnel themselves revealed another dimension of American humanitarian values. Rather than being relegated to menial tasks or excluded from medical practice, German doctors and nurses were often integrated into camp medical operations under American supervision. This professional respect allowed them to maintain their skills while experiencing firsthand the differences between American and German approaches to healthcare. Many German medical personnel later reported that this experience taught them more about advanced medical practice than their entire previous careers. The psychological impact of receiving quality medical care extended far beyond physical healing for German prisoners who had been conditioned to expect brutality and neglect. Many prisoners experienced profound cognitive dissonance as they reconciled their propaganda-induced expectations with the reality of American treatment. The careful attention to their medical needs, the respect shown for their dignity as patients, and the professional competence of their caregivers created an emotional response that many found difficult to process within their existing worldview. Personal interactions between American nurses and German prisoners often revealed touching moments of human connection that transcended national boundaries and wartime animosities. Nurses who initially wondered if they could provide compassionate care to enemy soldiers quickly discovered that professional medical ethics created a framework for treating all patients with equal dignity and attention. These relationships, built around the fundamental human needs of healing and comfort, became powerful demonstrations of shared humanity that challenged the dehumanizing narratives of wartime propaganda. The medical care provided to German prisoners became so renowned that it created challenges for American authorities, who received numerous complaints from citizens demanding harsher treatment. The government found it difficult to explain to the American public that treating prisoners according to Geneva Convention standards actually improved the likelihood that American prisoners in German custody would receive better treatment. This tension revealed the radical nature of the humanitarian approach being implemented in American POW camps, where professional medical ethics took precedence over popular demands for revenge. As German prisoners experienced month after month of consistently excellent medical care, their fundamental assumptions about American society, democratic values, and professional ethics began to undergo profound transformation that would influence their perspectives long after the war's end. The systematic exposure of German prisoners to American medical practices created an unexpected educational opportunity that would have far-reaching implications for post-war reconstruction. German medical personnel, initially suspicious of American methods, gradually came to appreciate the sophisticated infrastructure that supported quality healthcare delivery. They observed supply chain management systems that ensured consistent availability of medical resources administrative protocols that prioritized patient safety over bureaucratic convenience, and training programs that emphasized continuous professional development rather than rigid adherence to established hierarchies. The concept of patient advocacy, fundamental to American nursing practice, proved particularly revolutionary for German prisoners accustomed to authoritarian medical structures. American nurses routinely challenged physicians' orders when they believed alternative treatments might better serve patient needs, documented concerns about treatment protocols, and actively solicited patient feedback about their care experiences. This collaborative approach to healthcare, where multiple professionals contributed to treatment decisions based on patient welfare rather than rank or authority, represented a completely different model of professional responsibility. Advanced diagnostic procedures available in American medical facilities amazed German prisoners who had become accustomed to rudimentary examinations and limited testing. Regular medical inspections went far beyond the basic requirements of the Geneva Convention, incorporating comprehensive health assessments, nutritional evaluations, and preventive care measures. The systematic approach to health maintenance, including periodic radiographic screening for tuberculosis and detailed monitoring of chronic conditions, demonstrated a commitment to long-term patient welfare that exceeded anything in German military medical experience. The educational component of American medical care became apparent as nurses took time to explain treatments, discuss health conditions, and provide guidance on preventive measures. German prisoners, accustomed to receiving minimal information about their medical conditions, were surprised to find themselves included in discussions about treatment options, recovery expectations, and health maintenance strategies. This patient education approach reflected broader American values regarding individual autonomy and informed decision-making that contrasted sharply with the paternalistic medical culture they had previously experienced. Mental health care, virtually non-existent in German military medicine, received significant attention in American POW camps. Prisoners suffering from psychological trauma, adjustment difficulties, or emotional distress found themselves receiving compassionate care from mental health professionals who approached their conditions with scientific understanding rather than moral judgment. This treatment of mental health as legitimate medical concern, rather than personal weakness, provided many German prisoners with their first experience of comprehensive health care that addressed both physical and psychological well-being. The integration of German medical personnel into American camp operations created opportunities for professional development that many had never experienced. Rather than being excluded from medical practice or assigned only menial tasks, qualified German doctors and nurses were often given responsibilities that allowed them to maintain and expand their professional skills. Under American supervision, they participated in patient care decisions, contributed to treatment planning, and experienced the collaborative approach to medical practice that characterized American healthcare delivery. Documentation and quality assurance protocols impressed German medical personnel who had operated in systems where record-keeping was minimal and outcome tracking was virtually non-existent. American nurses maintained detailed patient records, tracked treatment outcomes, and participated in systematic reviews of care quality that aimed at continuous improvement rather than mere compliance with regulations. This evidence-based approach to healthcare represented a level of professional sophistication that many German prisoners had never encountered. The professional autonomy enjoyed by American nurses particularly impressed German prisoners who had been trained in rigid hierarchical systems where medical personnel simply followed orders without question. The authority of American nurses to make independent decisions about patient care, to challenge treatment protocols when necessary, and to advocate for patient needs regardless of institutional pressures demonstrated a model of professional responsibility that many German prisoners found both inspiring and intimidating. As German prisoners observed and gradually participated in American medical practices, they began to develop new perspectives on professional ethics, patient care, and the role of healthcare in a democratic society, setting the foundation for their eventual reintegration into post-war German medical institutions. The impact of American medical treatment extended far beyond physical healing to encompass fundamental changes in German prisoners' understanding of democratic values and social organization. The systematic provision of quality healthcare, regardless of rank, political affiliation, or national origin, demonstrated principles of human equality and universal dignity that challenged core Nazi ideological assumptions. German prisoners observed American medical personnel treating all patients with equal respect and attention, from high-ranking officers to common soldiers, illustrating democratic ideals through daily practice rather than abstract rhetoric. The administrative structure of American military medicine revealed sophisticated organizational principles that many German prisoners had never encountered. They witnessed decision-making processes that included input from multiple levels of personnel, quality assurance systems that prioritized patient outcomes over institutional hierarchy, and resource allocation methods that emphasized medical need rather than political considerations. This exposure to democratic institutional management provided practical education in the organizational structures that supported American society's commitment to individual welfare. Cultural exchange occurred naturally within the medical environment as American nurses and German prisoners shared experiences, perspectives, and professional knowledge. These interactions, conducted within the ethical framework of medical care, created opportunities for mutual understanding that transcended wartime animosities. German prisoners learned about American values, social structures, and professional practices, while American medical personnel gained insights into German culture, education, and social organization that humanized their former enemies. The psychological rehabilitation of German prisoners occurred gradually through their extended exposure to humanitarian treatment and professional respect. Many prisoners experienced profound internal conflicts as their direct observations of American society contradicted years of Nazi propaganda about American brutality, social decay, and moral corruption. The consistent demonstration of American values through medical care created cognitive dissonance that eventually led many prisoners to question fundamental assumptions about their own society and political system. Educational opportunities arose spontaneously as American medical personnel shared knowledge about democratic institutions, constitutional principles, and social organization. These informal discussions, often occurring during medical treatment or routine care, provided German prisoners with their first accurate information about American political and social systems. The credibility of this information was enhanced by the prisoners' direct observation of American values in practice through the medical care they received. The contrast between American and German approaches to social organization became apparent through the medical care system itself. German prisoners observed that American medical personnel enjoyed professional autonomy, participated in institutional decision-making, and were encouraged to innovate and improve practices. This participatory approach to institutional life demonstrated democratic principles that many prisoners had been taught were impossible or ineffective in practice. Re-education programs introduced later in the war built upon the foundation of trust and respect established through medical care. German prisoners who had experienced months of humanitarian treatment were more receptive to educational materials about democratic governance, individual rights, and social responsibility. The credibility earned by American personnel through their consistent demonstration of humanitarian values created an environment where formal educational efforts could be more effective. The long-term impact of this medical care experience would extend far beyond the war's end, as German prisoners returned to their homeland with fundamentally altered perspectives on healthcare, professional responsibility, and social organization. Many would become advocates for democratic reform in post-war Germany, carrying with them the lessons learned through their unexpected encounter with American humanitarian values in the most unlikely of circumstances. The transformation of enemy prisoners into potential partners in post-war reconstruction represented one of the most successful examples of soft power in modern history, achieved not through coercion or propaganda, but through the simple demonstration of professional competence and humanitarian concern. The testimonies of German prisoners returning to their homeland after the war created ripple effects throughout German society that would influence reconstruction efforts for decades to come. Former prisoners shared stories of American medical care that challenged prevailing assumptions about democratic societies, professional ethics, and humanitarian values. These personal accounts, backed by direct experience rather than propaganda, carried credibility that formal re-education programs could never achieve. Family members, friends, and colleagues listened as returning prisoners described medical facilities, treatment protocols, and professional relationships that demonstrated the practical benefits of democratic social organization. The influence of former German prisoners on post-war medical institutions became apparent as many advocated for reforms based on their American experiences. Doctors and nurses who had observed American medical practices pushed for changes in German healthcare delivery, including improved patient advocacy, enhanced professional autonomy, and systematic quality assurance protocols. The integration of American medical principles into German healthcare institutions represented one of the most tangible legacies of the prisoner of war experience, improving patient care for generations of Germans who would never know the source of these innovations. Professional relationships established during captivity occasionally continued after the war, as German medical personnel maintained correspondence with American colleagues who had supervised their work. These ongoing connections facilitated the exchange of medical knowledge, research findings, and professional practices that contributed to the internationalization of healthcare standards. The personal bonds formed through shared medical experiences transcended national boundaries and political differences, creating networks that supported post-war cooperation and understanding. The psychological impact of humanitarian treatment extended to families and communities as returning prisoners shared their experiences with broader German society. Many former prisoners became advocates for democratic values and international cooperation, using their personal experiences to counter extremist ideologies and promote reconciliation. Their testimonies about American treatment provided powerful counter-narratives to propaganda about democratic societies, contributing to the gradual transformation of German political culture in the post-war era. Educational institutions in post-war Germany benefited from the experiences of returning medical personnel who had observed American training methods, professional development programs, and educational philosophies. Former prisoners who became educators incorporated American approaches to medical education, emphasizing critical thinking, professional ethics, and patient-centered care. These educational innovations influenced generations of German medical professionals who would carry forward the humanitarian principles their teachers had learned as prisoners of war. The documentation of American medical practices by German prisoners created an unexpected archive of cross-cultural professional exchange. Letters, diaries, and formal reports produced by prisoners contained detailed observations about American healthcare delivery, administrative systems, and professional relationships. These documents would later serve as valuable resources for historians studying the impact of humanitarian treatment on international relations and post-war reconstruction efforts. International cooperation in medical research and practice was enhanced by the connections established between German and American medical personnel during the war. Former prisoners who returned to careers in medical research often sought collaboration with American institutions, contributing to advances in healthcare that benefited patients worldwide. The professional respect and personal relationships developed during captivity provided foundations for scientific cooperation that might otherwise have taken decades to establish. The success of American medical care in transforming German prisoners' perspectives influenced post-war policies regarding the treatment of captured personnel and civilian populations. American experiences with German prisoners demonstrated the practical benefits of humanitarian treatment, not only for moral reasons, but also for strategic advantages in winning hearts and minds. These lessons would be applied in subsequent conflicts and occupation scenarios, where medical care continued to serve as a powerful tool for demonstrating democratic values and building international goodwill. The legacy of this remarkable chapter in medical history extended far beyond the immediate post-war period, influencing international humanitarian law, medical ethics education, and approaches to conflict resolution that emphasized human dignity and professional responsibility over military expedience and political revenge. The broader implications of American medical treatment of German prisoners extended far beyond individual healing to encompass fundamental questions about human nature, professional responsibility, and the foundations of civilized society. The consistent demonstration of humanitarian values by American medical personnel, even toward enemy combatants, provided powerful evidence that democratic principles could be maintained even under the extreme pressures of total war. This achievement represented a triumph of institutional culture and professional ethics that challenged cynical assumptions about the inevitable brutalization of wartime medicine. The role of institutional leadership in maintaining humanitarian standards became evident through the policies and practices established by American military medical authorities. Senior medical officers insisted on adherence to Geneva Convention standards, not as minimum requirements, but as starting points for even higher levels of care. Their commitment to professional excellence and ethical treatment created environments where individual medical personnel could demonstrate their best qualities rather than succumbing to the dehumanizing pressures of wartime service. The psychological resilience demonstrated by American medical personnel who maintained their humanitarian commitments despite personal losses, combat trauma, and social pressures provided inspiring examples of professional dedication. Many nurses and doctors had lost family members, friends or colleagues to German military action, yet they continued to provide compassionate care to German prisoners without allowing personal grief to compromise their professional responsibilities. This commitment to ethical standards under extreme circumstances demonstrated the power of professional training and institutional culture to sustain humanitarian values. The educational value of this experience for American society itself should not be underestimated, as medical personnel returned from their service with enhanced understanding of their own values and capabilities. Many discovered through their treatment of German prisoners that their commitment to humanitarian principles was deeper and more resilient than they had previously realized. This self-knowledge strengthened their professional identities and contributed to post-war advances in medical education, patient care, and professional ethics that benefited American healthcare for generations. The international reputation of American medicine was significantly enhanced by the documented quality of care provided to German prisoners, creating goodwill that facilitated post-war cooperation and exchange. Foreign medical professionals who learned about American treatment of prisoners developed respect for American healthcare institutions and sought opportunities for collaboration and education. This soft power influence contributed to American leadership in international health organizations and medical research cooperation that extended far beyond the immediate post-war period. The demonstration that professional medical ethics could transcend national boundaries and wartime animosities provided a model for international humanitarian action that influenced subsequent conflicts and crisis responses. The American example in treating German prisoners established precedents for medical neutrality, professional responsibility, and humanitarian obligation that were incorporated into international law and medical education worldwide. These principles continue to guide medical personnel in conflict zones and disaster areas, ensuring that human suffering is addressed regardless of political considerations. The documentation and study of this experience contributed to advances in medical ethics education, cross-cultural healthcare delivery, and conflict resolution that continue to influence professional training programs. Medical schools incorporated case studies from the German prisoner experience into their curricula, using these examples to illustrate the practical application of ethical principles under challenging circumstances. These educational innovations helped prepare generations of medical professionals to maintain humanitarian standards regardless of external pressures. The long-term impact on German-American relations was profound, as former prisoners became advocates for friendship and cooperation between their nations. Many maintained lifelong gratitude for the medical care they received and became informal ambassadors for American values and institutions. Their personal testimonies about American humanitarian treatment contributed to the successful post-war alliance between former enemies and provided foundations for cooperation that continue to benefit both nations today. The ultimate lesson of this remarkable chapter in medical history was that humanitarian values, when institutionally supported and professionally implemented, possess the power to transform enemies into allies and to demonstrate the practical benefits of democratic principles through direct experience, rather than abstract rhetoric. The enduring influence of American medical treatment of German prisoners during World War II established benchmarks for humanitarian action that continue to guide medical professionals, military personnel, and policymakers in the 21st century. The systematic documentation of care protocols, patient outcomes, and professional relationships created an archive of best practices that have informed medical ethics education international humanitarian law, and conflict resolution strategies for over 8 decades. This legacy demonstrates that individual acts of professional competence and humanitarian concern, when supported by institutional commitment and adequate resources, can achieve strategic objectives that military force alone cannot accomplish. Modern medical education programs continue to utilize case studies from the German prisoner experience to illustrate the practical application of ethical principles under extreme circumstances. Medical schools worldwide incorporate these historical examples into their curricula, demonstrating to students that professional obligations transcend national boundaries, political differences, and personal prejudices. The American nurses and doctors who treated German prisoners with such exceptional care provide inspiring models for contemporary medical professionals facing their own challenges in maintaining humanitarian standards under difficult conditions. International humanitarian organizations have adopted principles derived from the American Prisoner of War Medical Program in their own operational protocols and training procedures. The emphasis on dignity, professional competence, and systematic care delivery that characterized American treatment of German prisoners has become standard practice for organizations providing medical assistance in conflict zones and disaster areas worldwide. These institutions recognize that quality medical care serves not only immediate healing purposes, but also broader objectives of reconciliation, trust building, and social reconstruction. The influence on post-war German medical institutions proved to be both profound and lasting, as former prisoners implemented reforms based on their American experiences. German healthcare delivery systems incorporated patient advocacy protocols, professional autonomy principles, and quality assurance mechanisms that reflected lessons learned in American prisoner of war camps. These institutional changes improved patient care for millions of Germans and contributed to the development of modern European healthcare systems that emphasize individual rights and professional responsibility. Contemporary military medical services continue to study the American Prisoner of War Medical Program as a model for maintaining humanitarian standards while achieving strategic objectives. The demonstration that excellent medical care could transform enemy combatants into allies provided valuable lessons for military planners seeking to win hearts and minds through humanitarian action rather than coercive force. These insights have influenced military doctrine, training programs, and operational procedures in numerous conflicts since World War II. The personal relationships established between American medical personnel and German prisoners created lasting bonds that facilitated post-war cooperation and reconciliation. Many of these connections continued through correspondence, professional collaboration, and family relationships that spanned generations. These personal links provided foundations for broader German-American friendship and demonstrated the power of individual humanitarian action to create positive international relationships that serve national interests more effectively than traditional diplomatic approaches. The psychological transformation of German prisoners who experienced American medical care created influential advocates for democratic values and international cooperation in post-war German society. Many former prisoners became leaders in education, healthcare, and public service, carrying forward the lessons they learned about democratic governance, professional ethics, and humanitarian obligation. Their influence on German political and social development contributed to the successful transformation of Germany from a militaristic dictatorship to a peaceful democracy that became America's most reliable European ally. Research programs investigating the long-term effects of humanitarian treatment have validated the strategic wisdom of American policies toward German prisoners, demonstrating quantifiable benefits in terms of reduced recidivism, enhanced cooperation, and improved post-conflict relationships. These findings have influenced policies regarding the treatment of prisoners, civilian populations, and former combatants in numerous subsequent conflicts, validating the American approach as both morally correct and strategically effective. The ultimate legacy of American medical treatment of German prisoners during World War II lies not merely in the individual lives saved or transformed, but in the enduring demonstration that humanitarian principles, professional competence, and institutional commitment can achieve objectives that coercive force cannot accomplish. This lesson continues to guide medical professionals, military leaders, and policymakers who seek to build a more peaceful and cooperative world through the practical application of universal human values that transcend national boundaries and political differences. As the final German prisoners departed American shores in 1946, they carried with them far more than memories of their captivity. They bore witness to a demonstration of human values that would influence their lives and the lives of countless others for generations to come. The American nurses and medical personnel who provided such exceptional care during those tumultuous years achieved something remarkable. They proved that even in the darkest hours of global conflict, the highest ideals of medical professionalism and human compassion could not only be maintained but could serve as powerful instruments of transformation and reconciliation. The story of German prisoners receiving better medical care from American nurses than from their own doctors represents more than historical curiosity. It illuminates fundamental truths about human nature, professional responsibility, and the power of humanitarian action to transcend the barriers of war and ideology. In military hospitals and prison camp infirmaries across America, individual acts of professional competence and personal compassion combined to create one of the most successful programs of cultural transformation in modern history. The nurses who changed bandages, administered medications, and provided comfort to enemy soldiers could not have foreseen the far-reaching consequences of their professional dedication. They simply applied their training, honored their ethical obligations, and treated their patients with the dignity that their profession demanded. Yet through these seemingly ordinary acts of medical care, they contributed to the reconstruction of German society, the strengthening of international humanitarian law, and the development of post-war cooperation that would benefit both nations for decades to come. Today, as medical professionals around the world continue to face challenges in maintaining humanitarian standards under difficult circumstances, the example set by American medical personnel during World War II remains both inspiring and instructive. Their legacy reminds us that professional competence combined with humanitarian concern possesses a transformative power that extends far beyond individual healing to encompass the broader healing of nations and the advancement of human civilization itself. The wounded German soldiers who found unexpected compassion in American military hospitals learned that their enemies were capable of demonstrating the highest virtues of medical professionalism and human decency. In turn, they became living testimonies to the power of humanitarian action to transform understanding, build bridges across cultural divides, and create foundations for lasting peace. Their story continues to inspire new generations of medical professionals who serve not merely their own nations, but the broader cause of human healing and reconciliation. In the end, the remarkable medical care provided to German prisoners by American nurses stands as testament to a simple but profound truth. When professional excellence meets humanitarian commitment, supported by institutional dedication and adequate resources, the resulting healing extends far beyond individual patients to touch the very foundations of human civilization. This legacy challenges each new generation to maintain these standards, honor these principles, and continue the work of healing that knows no boundaries of nation, ideology, or time.